My husband swore he was staying late at the office to provide for our family, but when I checked his location one night, it revealed a truth he never thought I'd discover. It was one of those ordinary Thursday evenings in our suburban split level house on Maple Drive, the kind where the rain pattered against the windows, like a persistent reminder of the grayness outside. Mirroring the quiet exhaustion I felt after a long day, wrangling spreadsheets at my remote accounting job while juggling Emily's virtual piano lesson and the endless cycle of laundry that seemed to multiply in the hamper like some unspoken resentment. I just finished heating up the leftover lasagna from Tuesday, the one I'd made with extra cheese because Alex always said it reminded him of his mom's cooking, even though I knew deep down it was just a small way to keep the peace in our increasingly routine marriage. The scent of garlic and tomato sauce, filling the kitchen as I set the table for two. Well, three if you counted Emily, but she'd already scarfed down her portion earlier, retreating to her room with her iPad to binge watch that new teen drama on Netflix. Her laughter echoing faintly down the hall, a sound that usually warmed me, but tonight felt like a fragile bubble I didn't want to burst. Alex had texted around 5, his usual message popping up on my phone screen amid the notifications from work emails and the grocery app reminding me we were low on milk. Staying late again, big project deadline. Love you, provide for our fam. Followed by a heart emoji that once made my stomach flutter, but now just seemed like punctuation to his absence, and I sighed, telling myself it was for us, for the mortgage on this house with its leaky basement we'd promised to fix next spring, for Emily's braces that cost a fortune last year, for the family vacation to Disney we'd been saving up for, even though the thought of him hunched over his desk at the marketing firm downtown, surrounded by fluorescent lights and the hum of computers, made me feel a pang of guilt for not appreciating his sacrifices more. But something nagged at me that night, a quiet unease that had been building for months, ever since his late nights stretched from occasional to habitual. His clothes carrying a faint whiff of unfamiliar perfume that he blamed on the office elevator, crowded with colleagues, his phone buzzing more often, with messages he dismissed as work alerts. And I'd pushed it down, telling myself I was being paranoid. But pushed it down. That marriage after 12 years wasn't all fireworks but steady reliability, like the way he still made coffee every morning, with exactly 2 sugars for me, or how he'd surprise Emily with her favorite strawberry Pop Tarts after a tough day at middle school. Yet, as I sat on the couch after dinner, the rain intensifying into a steady drum against the roof, Emily's door closed upstairs, where she was probably texting her friends about the latest school gossip, I picked up my phone idly, scrolling through social media feeds of other couples posting anniversary selfies that made my chest tighten with envy, and then, almost without thinking, I opened the family location app we'd installed years ago for safety, back when Emily started walking home from school alone. A tool to keep tabs on each other in this unpredictable world, though we'd joked it was more for finding lost phones than anything sinister. His dot should have been at the office building on Elm Street, a static blue icon amid the digital map of our city. But there it was, pulsing softly at an address I didn't recognize, a residential street in the upscale neighborhood across town, the kind with manicured lawns and houses that screamed quiet affluence, and my heart stuttered, a cold wave washing over me as I zoomed in, confirming it wasn't a glitch. Wasn't the office, wasn't even a client meeting spot he'd mentioned before. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering, the lasagna churning in my stomach like regret. Memories flashing of our wedding day when he promised forever in that small backyard ceremony, with just family. Of the miscarriage we'd endured before Emily came along, binding us in shared grief. Of the way he'd held me during my dad's funeral 3 years ago, whispering that we'd get through anything together. But this dot on a map felt like a betrayal scripted in pixels, and I refreshed the app, hoping for a mistake, but it stayed put, mocking my trust, and suddenly the house felt too quiet, the rain too loud, Emily's distant giggles a reminder of what was at stake. I paced the living room, the carpet worn from years of family footsteps, my mind racing through excuses, maybe a work friend's house for a strategy session, maybe he'd stopped for takeout and the app lagged. But deep down, a voice whispered the truth I didn't want to hear. The one that had surfaced in quiet moments when his hugs felt perfunctory, his eyes distant during dinner conversations about Emily's soccer practice or my promotion that he barely acknowledged. By 9, when his car finally pulled into the driveway, headlights cutting through the downpour like accusations, I was sitting at the kitchen table, phone clutched in my hand, the uneaten lasagna congealed on my plate. And as he walked in, shaking off his wet coat, his face lighting up with that practiced smile, saying, "Hey babe, sorry I'm so late." Traffic was a nightmare. I held up the phone, my voice trembling but steady. "Where were you really, Alex? The app shows you weren't at the office." And his expression shifted from casual to cornered, color draining from his cheeks as he set down his briefcase, the thud echoing like finality. He stammered, "What? It's probably wrong, let me see," reaching for the phone. But I pulled it back, the evidence burning in my palm, and as I demanded answers, the words tumbling out in a rush of hurt, how I'd believed him, how our family depended on that trust, he sank into the chair opposite me, rubbing his temples, the rain slamming harder now, as if the sky itself was weeping for us. And finally, after what felt like an eternity of silence broken only by the tick of the wall clock, he whispered, "Okay, okay, it's not what you think, or maybe it is," his voice cracking, admitting there was someone else. A colleague named Sarah from the creative team that had started as drinks after work, innocent at first, but grew into something more. Late nights, not at the office, but at her apartment, swearing it was just a fling, that he loved me, loved our life, but felt lost in the monotony, stressed from providing, and as the words spilled, each one a dagger twisting in my gut, I felt the world tilt, tears blurring my vision, the pain raw and visceral, like grief for a death that hadn't happened yet, thinking of Emily upstairs, oblivious, How I'd have to shield her from this shattering. How our home, once a sanctuary of soccer cleats in the hall and family movie nights on the couch, now felt tainted. I stood, my chair scraping harshly against the tile, telling him to sleep on the couch tonight, my voice hollow, as I retreated upstairs, passing Emily's door where soft music played, pausing to compose myself before peeking in to say goodnight, her innocent face lit by the screen. By the screen, asking if everything was okay, and I forced a smile, murmuring, "Just tired, sweetie," closing the door gently, then collapsing on our bed, his side empty, the sheets still smelling of his cologne, and sobbed into the pillow, the betrayal echoing in my mind. Wondering how we'd rebuild from this abyss, if we even could. The rain, a relentless companion to my unraveling heart. The immediate fallout, a chasm opening beneath our family's foundation, leaving me adrift in shock and anger that burned like fire through the long, sleepless night ahead. The house settled into an unnatural hush after I climbed the stairs, leaving Alex alone in the kitchen with the cold lasagna, and the rain still hammering the roof like it wanted to drown out everything we just said. I closed our bedroom door with a soft click that felt louder than any slam. Then stood there in the dark for a long minute, breathing shallow, the familiar shapes of the dresser and the armchair where I used to nurse Emily, now looking foreign, accusatory, as if the room itself had been complicit in whatever had been happening behind my back. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, probably a work email or one of the group chats I'd muted weeks ago, but I ignored it, instead sinking onto the edge of the mattress, the springs giving their usual small protest, and stared at the empty space beside me where Alex's pillow still held the faint indentation of his head from this morning. The betrayal sat heavy in my chest. Not just the fact of another woman. Sarah, he'd said, her name like it was ordinary. Like introducing a coworker at a barbecue. But the months of careful lies layered over our everyday life. The way he'd kissed my forehead before leaving for late nights, told Emily he'd bring home ice cream if she finished her math homework, texted me heart emojis while he was somewhere else entirely. I kept replaying his confession. The way his voice had cracked on "I still love you." How he'd reached across the table like he wanted to take my hand but stopped when he saw my flinch. Part of me wanted to believe the love part was true because believing anything else meant our entire 12 years had been a performance, and I wasn't ready to dismantle that yet. Downstairs, I heard the faint clink of dishes. He was cleaning up, probably, the way he always did after arguments, as if scrubbing plates could restore order, and then the creak of the couch as he settled in, no footsteps coming up the stairs to plead or explain further, which hurt in its own way, like he'd already accepted the distance I'd demanded. I pulled the duvet over myself, fully clothed, too drained to change, and lay on my side facing his empty half, the ceiling fan ticking softly above me, stirring the same air we breathed together for years. Sleep refused to come. Instead, memories arrived in waves. Our first apartment with the lumpy futon and the neighbor's cat that kept sneaking in. The night Emily was born, when he cried harder than I did, holding her tiny fist. The quiet evenings we used to spend on this very bed, scrolling phones side by side. Feet touching under the covers, content in the smallness of it all. Now every sweet recollection felt poisoned, retroactively suspect. Had he already been drifting then? Had I missed signs because I was too tired from work, too focused on keeping the household running smoothly, too trusting? Guilt twisted in with the anger, a sick cocktail that made my throat close. Around midnight, I heard soft footsteps, Alex moving through the dark living room, probably getting water or checking his phone, and I tensed, half expecting him to climb the stairs. To knock? To try to bridge the gap he'd blown open, but he didn't. He stayed downstairs, respecting the boundary, or maybe too ashamed to face me again tonight. That restraint stung almost as much as the confession itself. Eventually, I got up, padded to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, avoiding my reflection because I didn't want to see how wrecked I looked, and crept downstairs just far enough to peer over the banister. He was on the couch under the throw blanket we bought at a flea market 5 summers ago, the blue one Emily still dragged around when she was sick. His phone screen glowed faintly, illuminating the tired lines of his face as he stared at it, not scrolling, just holding it like a lifeline or a grenade. He didn't notice me watching. I retreated before he could, climbed back into bed, and this time the tears came harder, silent but relentless, soaking the pillowcase until it was damp and cold against my cheek. I thought about Emily sleeping down the hall, her door still closed, her world intact, for one more night. Tomorrow she'd wake up expecting pancakes, or at least cereal, expecting her dad to tease her about her messy ponytail, expecting me to remind her to pack her flute for band practice. And the thought of preserving that normalcy while everything inside me screamed made my ribs ache. I wondered how many mornings we'd already faked it, how many times I'd smiled over coffee while he carried guilt in his pocket like loose change. By 3 a.m., exhaustion finally pulled me under, but it was shallow. Sleep, fractured by dreams of maps with pulsing dots that led nowhere good, of hands reaching for me and dissolving into smoke. When the alarm went off at 6:30, Emily's school bus came at 7:20, I dragged myself upright, head pounding, eyes swollen, and moved through the motions on autopilot. Brushing teeth, pulling on yesterday's jeans, starting the coffee maker, even though the routine felt obscene, now. Alex was already in the kitchen when I came down, hair rumpled, still in the clothes from last night, brewing the pot with mechanical precision. He glanced at me, eyes red-rimmed, and murmured, "I'll take her to the bus stop if you want," offering the small olive branch of practical help because he knew words were useless this morning. I nodded once, not trusting my voice, and busied myself packing Emily's lunch. Apple slices, turkey sandwich, the note I always tucked in. "You've got this. Love, Mom," while she thundered downstairs in her hoodie and mismatched socks, chattering about a group project and how Mia forgot her lines in the play rehearsal yesterday. She didn't notice the tension. Kids rarely do until it's too late. Alex knelt to tie her shoe when she complained it was loose. His hands steady, even though I could see them tremble slightly. And when she hugged us both goodbye, quick, perfunctory, already thinking about her friends, I felt a fresh stab of protectiveness, a fierce determination that whatever happened between us, she would not carry this wound. After the door closed behind her, I stood at the sink rinsing her cereal bowl back to him, and he said quietly, "I'm sorry, Claire. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am." I didn't turn around. "Sorry doesn't erase the nights I waited up believing you were working for us," I answered, voice low so it wouldn't carry to the street. He didn't reply right away. I heard him exhale, long and ragged. "I'll sleep on the couch again tonight. Or the guest room if you want me out of the way completely." The guest room. Emily's old nursery we'd never quite repurposed. Felt like exile, and part of me wanted to sentence him to it. But another part recoiled at the permanence that implied. "Couch is fine," I said finally, still not looking at him. "We need to talk more. Really talk. Not tonight. Maybe tomorrow when she's at school. But no more lies. If there's anything else, anything at all, you tell me now." Silence stretched, then he whispered, "There isn't. It ended 2 weeks ago. I swear. 2 weeks." The timeline landed like a slap. He'd come home every night since then, kissed me, good night, helped with dishes, all while carrying the secret fresh enough to bleed. I gripped the edge of the sink until my knuckles whitened. "I don't know if I can believe you," I admitted, and it was the truest thing I'd said since the confrontation. He didn't argue, didn't defend. He just stood there, letting the weight settle between us. The coffee maker beeped, signaling the brew was done, and the ordinary sound felt absurdly cruel. I poured 2 mugs out of habit, slid one across the island toward him without meeting his eyes, then took mine upstairs to drink alone at the desk where I was supposed to be working from home today. The day stretched ahead, emails, Zoom calls. The pretense of productivity, while inside me everything churned. Grief for the marriage I thought we had. Fury at him for breaking it. Fear that we were already too far gone to salvage. And beneath it all, a stubborn, quiet thread of something that refused to snap completely. The part that still remembered the boy who once drove 3 hours in a snowstorm to bring me soup when I had the flu. I didn't know if that thread was strong enough to hold us, but as I stared out the rain-streaked window at the gray street, where our daughter had just disappeared onto the bus, I realized I wasn't ready to cut it yet, not tonight. Not while there was still breath left in what we built. The next morning arrived brittle and gray, the rain finally exhausted into a fine mist that clung to the windows like regret we couldn't wipe away. I woke before the alarm, body heavy with the kind of fatigue that sleep can't touch, but not touch, and lay there listening to the house breathe, pipes ticking as the heat came on, the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the soft rustle of Alex shifting on the couch cushions that must have felt like penance after 2 nights. Emily's door stayed closed longer than usual. She'd been up late texting about some drama with her best friend Riley over who got the lead in the spring musical, and I'd heard her voice rise and fall through the wall around 10, the kind of teenage turbulence that normally would have pulled me in with hot cocoa and listening. But last night I'd stayed in bed, too hollowed out to be the steady parent she needed. When she finally emerged, hair in a messy topknot, and still in pajama pants dotted with little stars, she paused at the top of the stairs, sensing the shift in the air the way animals do before a storm, and asked, "Why's Dad on the couch again? Is he sick?" Her voice carried that careful neutrality kids use when they're testing the water, afraid the answer might be too deep to swim in. I forced myself to meet her eyes from the kitchen doorway, where I stood pouring orange juice into her favorite glass, the one with the chipped rim she refused to let us throw away, and said, "We're just having a grown-up disagreement, honey. Nothing to worry about. He'll be back in our room soon." The lie tasted metallic on my tongue, but the truth felt too sharp to hand her at 7:15 on a school morning. She was 12, old enough to sense fractures, but not old enough to carry the full weight of them without it reshaping her trust in the world. She studied me for a beat, then nodded slowly, the way she did when she didn't quite buy it, but knew pushing would only make things worse, and went to the table where Alex had already set out her cereal bowl and the milk carton, his movements deliberate, almost reverent, like he was trying to prove through small acts that he was still here, still hers. He caught my gaze over her head and mouthed, "Thank you," a silent acknowledgement that I'd chosen protection over honesty for now, and I looked away because gratitude from him felt like salt in the wound. The bus stop ritual unfolded on autopilot. Coats zipped, backpack slung, quick kiss on her forehead, from both of us in the foyer while she complained about the drizzle ruining her hair. And when the yellow bus swallowed her up, the house fell quiet again. The kind of quiet that presses in on your eardrums. Alex lingered by the front door after it closed, hands in his pockets, staring at the empty street like he could will her back, then turned to me and said, "Lo, we need to figure out how to handle this with her. She's going to notice more if we keep pretending." His voice was rough from lack of sleep, eyes shadowed, and for the first time since the confrontation, I saw real fear in them, not just for himself, but for what this could do to the girl who still believed her parents' arguments ended with apologies and ice cream. I nodded once, throat tight. She notices everything, but I'm not ready to tell her the whole truth, not until we know if there's anything left to save. The words hung between us, raw and unvarnished, the first time either of us had voiced the possibility that we might not make it through. He exhaled, shoulders dropping. "Fair. Then let's start with boundaries. For her sake, and ours." We moved to the living room because the kitchen felt too domestic, too full of ordinary routines we couldn't trust anymore. I sat on the armchair. He took the far end of the couch. careful to leave space, and we laid out the rules like survivors mapping safe ground after an earthquake. No more late nights without full transparency. Location sharing stays on. No deleting messages, passwords, if I asked, though the thought of demanding them made me feel small and controlling. He agreed without hesitation, said he'd already blocked Sarah's number last week, showed me the call log to prove it, his thumb scrolling slowly so I could see every outgoing and incoming since the breakup he claimed happened before I checked that night. I didn't thank him. Proof felt like the bare minimum now. We talked about schedules, how he'd come straight home after work unless he texted me first with details, how I'd try not to check the app obsessively but couldn't promise I wouldn't because trust wasn't a switch I could flip. He admitted he'd been seeing a therapist on his own for the last month. Not because of the affair exactly, but because the pressure of providing had started to feel like drowning, how he'd convinced himself that a distraction was harmless until it wasn't. Hearing that stung, knowing he'd sought help elsewhere first, that he'd been carrying the weight alone while I thought we were just drifting through normal midlife fatigue. But it also cracked open a sliver of understanding. Maybe he hadn't set out to hurt me. Maybe he'd been lost in his own quiet panic. I told him I'd booked my first individual session for next Tuesday, the soonest the counselor had, a woman recommended by a friend from book club who'd gone through her own rough patch last year. We didn't hug or touch. The air between us still crackled with too much unresolved hurt. But sitting in the same room naming the damage felt like the smallest step forward, a way of saying we weren't ready to walk away yet. By noon, I had to log into work. We pretending normalcy through spreadsheets and muted to Zoom calls, while he went to the basement to tinker with the old bike he'd promised to fix for Emily's birthday next month. The metallic clinks and occasional curses drifting up through the floorboards, like proof he was still trying to contribute something tangible. When Emily came home, cheeks flushed from recess, and complaining about a pop quiz in science, she dropped her backpack by the door and immediately asked if we'd fixed it yet, using air quotes with exaggerated sarcasm that almost made me laugh, despite everything. I pulled her into a side hug on the couch, breathing in the faint strawberry scent of her shampoo, and said, "Not all the way, but we're working on it. Sometimes grown-ups need time, like when you and Riley fight and have to cool off before talking." She considered that, then looked at Alex, who was pretending to read emails on his phone across the room. "You're not getting divorced, right?" The question landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading fast. Alex set his phone down, met her eyes directly. "No, sweetheart, we're not. We love you too much, and we love each other too. We just have some things to sort out." She searched his face, then mine, weighing the words against whatever she'd picked up from overheard whispers or friends' stories about split parents. Finally, she shrugged, the motion small but loaded. "Okay, but if you do, I want to live with both of you. Not 1 week here, 1 week there. That's stupid." Her practicality pierced me. She was already negotiating terms, protecting her own heart in the only way she knew how. I squeezed her shoulder. "We hear you." The rest of the evening passed in careful normalcy. Homework at the kitchen table, take-out pizza, because neither of us had the energy to cook. A family episode of that baking show we all pretended to like, while the tension simmered beneath the surface, like heat under a lid. When it was time for bed, Emily hugged us both extra long, then whispered to me in the hallway, "Promise you'll tell me if it gets really bad." I promised, hating how the lie by omission felt necessary, and watched her disappear into her room. Downstairs, Alex gathered the throw blanket, preparing for another night on the couch, but before he settled, he paused, looked up the stairs toward her closed door, and said quietly, "She's tougher than we think, but she shouldn't have to be." I nodded, throat thick. "Then we keep shielding her until we're sure what we're shielding her from." He didn't argue, just turned off the lamp, leaving the hallway light on the way he always did for her nighttime bathroom runs. I climbed the stairs alone again, paused outside her door to listen to the soft rhythm of her breathing, then went to our room, still ours, even if only technically, and sat on the bed with my journal, something I hadn't touched in years. I wrote the date, then one line. Tonight, we chose her over the truth. And I don't know if that's protecting her, or protecting us from facing how broken we are. The ink blurred under a tear I didn't bother wiping away. Downstairs, the house creaked as Alex shifted, settling in for another uncomfortable night, and I realized the real boundary we'd set today wasn't about locations or phones. It was the fragile agreement to keep putting one careful foot in front of the other, for the person sleeping between us. The one who still believed family could bend without breaking completely. Saturday morning dawned with a deceptive clarity, the kind of crisp blue sky that follows days of relentless rain, as if the weather itself had decided to give us a brief reprieve we hadn't earned. I woke to the sound of Emily's laughter drifting up from the kitchen, bright and unburdened, mingling with the clatter of bowls and the low murmur of Alex's voice, reading the weekend comics aloud in exaggerated voices, the way he used to when she was little. For a split second, lying there with sunlight slanting through the blinds onto the empty side of the bed, I almost believed the last few days had been a bad dream, that everything below was still the family I'd built my life around. But then the ache in my chest reminded me, the couch creak last night when he shifted uncomfortably, the way he'd avoided my eyes when he said goodnight through the half-open bedroom door. I stayed upstairs longer than necessary, scrolling mindlessly through my phone, Instagram reels of perfect families on fall hikes, a text from my sister asking how the week had been that I hadn't answered yet, until the smell of pancakes pulled me down. Emily was at the table in her favorite oversized hoodie, syrup already smeared on her chin, waving her fork triumphantly. Dad made chocolate chip ones, and he didn't burn them this time. Alex stood at the stove in yesterday's t-shirt and sweatpants, spatula in hand, offering me a small, tentative smile when our eyes met. "There's coffee." Fresh pot. I nodded, poured myself a mug, added the 2 sugars out of habit, even though my stomach twisted at the normalcy of it, and sat across from Emily, forcing my face into something resembling calm. She chattered through breakfast about a sleepover invitation from Riley next weekend, about how they were planning to make slime and watch scary movies, and I listened with half an ear, nodding at the right moments, while Alex moved quietly around us, clearing plates, wiping counters. His presence careful, almost apologetic in its usefulness. When Emily finally ran upstairs to FaceTime Riley and show off the new nail polish she'd gotten, the kitchen fell quiet, except for the drip of the faucet he'd been meaning to fix for months. I looked at him over the rim of my mug. I need space this weekend. Real space. Not just separate rooms. The words came out steadier than I felt. He set the dish towel down slowly, nodded once. Okay. Where? My sister's. I'll take Emily with me. She can have the sleep over there instead. Riley lives close enough, and you can. Stay here. Or go somewhere. I don't care. Just not here with me pretending everything's fine. He rubbed the back of his neck, the gesture so familiar it hurt. How long? Tonight and tomorrow night. Back Monday morning for school. I'll text you the plan. He didn't argue, didn't plead. He just said, tell her it's a fun girls' weekend. She'll like that. And somehow that agreement, simple, immediate, felt like the first honest thing we'd done since the confrontation. Packing took less time than I expected. Emily bounced around her room, thrilled at the sudden adventure, stuffing her backpack with pajamas, her slime-making kit, the stuffed otter she still slept with, even though she swore she was too old for it now. I told her dad had work stuff to catch up on and needed quiet. That we were going to Aunt Jenna's for a change of scenery, maybe hit the mall and get pretzels, and she bought it easily, too excited about the prospect of cousin time and junk food to question the logistics. Alex helped carry the bags to the car, hugged Emily extra long in the driveway, whispered something in her ear that made her giggle and hug him back harder, then stepped back as I slid behind the wheel. Our eyes met over the roof of the car for a second. His shadowed with something like grief, mine guarded, and he said quietly, text me when you get there, and if you need anything. I nodded, started the engine, and pulled away, watching him in the rear view until he was just a figure standing alone in the driveway, hands in his pockets, the house behind him looking suddenly too big. The drive to Jenna's took 40 minutes, traffic light on the highway, Emily singing along to her playlist in the passenger seat, off-key, but joyful, and for those minutes the knot in my chest loosened just enough to breathe. Jenna met us at the door with open arms, no questions yet, just the warm hug of someone who'd known me since we shared bunk beds. She'd guessed something was wrong from my terse text last night, asking if we could crash, but she waited until Emily was upstairs raiding the snack drawer with her cousins before pulling me into the kitchen and saying, okay. Spill, you look like you haven't slept in a week. I sat at her island, fingers tracing the edge of a coffee ring on the granite, and told her everything. The location ping, the name Sarah, the confession on the rainy Thursday, the careful boundaries we'd drawn for Emily's sake. The way trust felt like shattered glass we were trying to sweep up without cutting ourselves deeper. Jenna listened without interrupting, pouring wine, even though it was barely noon, sliding a glass across to me. When I finished, she reached over and squeezed my hand. You don't have to decide anything this weekend. Just be here. Let me feed you terrible takeout and bad reality TV. Let the kids run wild. You deserve a pause. And that's what we did. Saturday afternoon, we piled into Jenna's minivan and went to the mall. Emily and her cousins racing ahead to the arcade, while Jenna and I trailed behind with shopping bags and half-hearted complaints about how expensive everything was now. I bought Emily new sneakers she'd been eyeing, the kind with lights that flashed when she walked, and for a few hours, the simple act of watching her joy felt like medicine. That night, after the kids crashed in a tangle of sleeping bags in the basement playroom, Jenna and I sat on her back porch under a string of fairy lights, wrapped in blankets against the October chill, wine glasses refilled, and I cried, quiet, ugly sobs that had been waiting since Thursday. She didn't try to fix it, just sat with me, passing tissues, murmuring that it was okay to be furious, to be scared, to not know what came next. Sunday, we kept it low-key. Pancakes again. A walk in the neighborhood park where the leaves were finally turning golden red. Emily collecting the prettiest ones to press in her journal later. I checked my phone more than I wanted to admit. Alex had texted good morning to Emily, sent a photo of the fixed faucet with a goofy thumbs-up emoji, asked if we were okay. I didn't reply directly, but I let Emily send back heart emojis and a selfie of her with syrup on her nose. Each small exchange felt like testing the water temperature, seeing if it still burned. By Sunday evening, as I packed our things again, the anger had dulled to a steady ache, replaced by something colder and clearer, a decision forming that I wasn't ready to name yet. On the drive home, Emily fell asleep in the back seat, cheek pressed against the window, the pressed leaves tucked carefully in her backpack. The house lights were on when we pulled in. Alex had left them burning, a small gesture that twisted something in me, and he met us at the door, hair damp from a shower, wearing the soft gray Henley I'd bought him 2 Christmases ago. Emily woke groggy, hugged him sleepily, mumbled about how Aunt Jenna's cookies were better than ours, then trudged upstairs to bed. Alone in the foyer, coat still on, Alex looked at me and said, how was it? Good? Needed? I paused, then added, I talked to Jenna, a lot. She thinks I should start therapy sooner than Tuesday if I can swing it. He nodded. I'll watch Emily whenever you need. Or we can find a sitter. Whatever helps. No promises, no grand declarations. Just the offer of practical support. The kind that had always been our love language before it got complicated. I exhaled, long and slow. Tomorrow, after drop-off, I'm going to call the therapist and see if she has any cancellations this week, and when I get home, we talk more. About what transparency really looks like, about what I need to even consider staying. He swallowed, eyes steady on mine. I'll be here. I went upstairs to check on Emily. Found her already asleep with the otter tucked under her chin. Then came back down to find Alex had started the dishwasher and left my favorite mug on the counter with a tea bag in it. Chamomile, the kind that always helped me sleep. I didn't thank him out loud, but I took the mug, carried it to the couch, where he'd spread the throw blanket like an invitation to sit if I wanted. I didn't, not yet, but I sat in the armchair across from him instead of retreating upstairs immediately. We didn't speak much, just shared the quiet for 20 minutes. The television off, the house settling around us. When I finally stood to go to bed, he said softly, "I'm glad you came home." I looked at him, really looked, and saw the man who'd once driven through a blizzard for soup, who had held my hand through labor, who'd cried at our daughter's kindergarten graduation. The man who'd also lied for months. "I'm glad I had somewhere to go," I answered, honest, then climbed the stairs, leaving him on the couch again, but feeling, for the first time, that the distance wasn't quite as vast. The weekend away hadn't fixed anything, hadn't erased the betrayal, or rebuilt trust overnight. But it had given me rules of my own, to set, space when I needed it, honesty without excuses, and the right to decide, day by day, whether the life we'd built was worth the hard, slow work of repairing it. As I brushed my teeth and looked at my reflection, still tired, still hurt, but with a flicker of resolve in my eyes, I realized the pause had clarified one thing. I wasn't running anymore. I was choosing carefully what came next. Monday morning felt like stepping back into a life that no longer quite fit, the routine of school drop-off and coffee brewing, carrying the same motions but weighted with everything unspoken. Emily bounded down the stairs in her favorite denim jacket, backpack already slung over one shoulder, chattering about a science fair project she and Riley were doing on solar-powered models. Her enthusiasm a bright thread I clung to as I packed her lunch. Carrot sticks, string cheese, the usual post-it note with a tiny heart drawn in the corner. Alex was already at the stove, scrambling eggs the way she liked them, fluffy with a sprinkle of cheese. His movements quieter than usual, eyes flicking to me every few seconds, as if gauging whether the weekend away had softened anything, or simply given me time to sharpen my resolve. We didn't speak much beyond logistics. "I'll pick her up after band today," he said, and I nodded. "I have the first therapy session at 2 if the cancellation holds." But when Emily hugged us both goodbye, at the door, squeezing extra hard like she was anchoring us together, I felt the fragile truce we'd established hold for her sake. After the bus pulled away, I stood on the porch longer than necessary, watching the taillights disappear around the corner, the crisp fall air biting at my cheeks. Then went inside to the quiet house where Alex had left my travel mug filled, and waiting on the counter, steam curling up like a small, wordless offering. I took it, murmured, thanks, without looking at him, and drove to work in silence, the radio off, letting the thoughts circle. The betrayal still raw, but no longer the only thing in the room, crowded now by the weekend's distance, and the decision to try individual therapy before we attempted anything joint. The counselor's office was in a low brick building near the community center, the kind of place with soft neutral walls and abstract art that wasn't supposed to mean anything. Dr. Sovanetti Sentry. Elena Ramirez greeted me in the waiting area with a calm handshake and led me to a small room with 2 armchairs, a box of tissues discreetly placed, and a window overlooking a parking lot dotted with turning leaves. She asked what brought me in, and the question unlocked something. I started with the facts, the location ping, the name Sarah, the months of lies woven into our daily life, but soon the words veered into the deeper ache. How I'd always prided myself on being the steady one, the one who kept the household calendar color-coded, who remembered vaccine schedules and parent-teacher conferences, who believed that reliability was love's truest form, and how discovering the affair felt like proof I'd been wrong about everything, including myself. Dr. Ramirez listened without filling the silences, nodding occasionally, asking gentle questions. What did that steadiness cost you? When did you first notice yourself pulling back? And by the end of the 50 minutes I was crying again, quieter this time, the tears less frantic and more like release. She suggested homework, a daily journal entry, not about him but about what I felt in my body when I thought of the marriage. Tight chest, heavy limbs, the occasional unexpected warmth when I remembered good moments, and to notice without judging. I left with a card for emergency contact, and a sense that the pain had edges now, definable, something I could sit with instead of drowning in. Back home, the house was empty. Alex had gone to his own session across town, and I used the quiet to start the journal on my laptop at the kitchen table, typing slowly. Today, my shoulders feel like they're carrying bricks, but when Emily laughed this morning, the weight lifted for a second, and I hated how much I still need this family to feel whole. The words looked small on the screen, but putting them out there made the afternoon feel less suffocating. Alex came home around 4, carrying grocery bags, milk, bananas, the almond butter Emily liked, and set them down quietly. "How was it?" he asked, not pushing, just leaving the question open. I considered dodging, but the therapy had cracked something loose. Hard, good hard. She asked questions I didn't have answers for yet. He nodded, unpacking slowly. Mine too. Mine too. He's helping me see how I turned stress into escape instead of talking. We didn't elaborate. It felt too soon to share details, like handing over fragile new pieces of ourselves before they'd hardened. But that evening, after Emily's homework was done and she was upstairs, practicing flute, notes floating down the stairs like hesitant birds, we ended up in the living room, again, me in the armchair, him on the couch, a careful distance between us. I took a breath and said, "I want to try something small. Transparency, but not surveillance. If you're going to be late, text me the reason and where you'll be. Not because I'll check every time, but because I need to know you're choosing honesty now." He met my eyes. "I can do that. And if you need to ask about anything, My phone. My schedule. Whatever. I'll hand it over. No defensiveness. It wasn't a grand gesture, no tears or promises of forever, but it felt like the first mutual step, a rule we were both agreeing to without resentment hanging over it. Later, when Emily came down for a glass of water, she paused in the doorway, looking between us. You guys are talking more. That's good, right? Her voice was cautious, but hopeful, and Alex smiled. Small, genuine. Yeah, kiddo. It's good. She grinned. Then darted back upstairs, leaving us in a silence that felt less heavy. Before bed, I did something I hadn't planned. I left the bedroom door open, a crack when I went in. Not an invitation exactly, but not the firm closure of the past nights either. Alex noticed from the couch, hesitated, then carried his pillow upstairs quietly, pausing in the doorway. Can I sleep in here? Not touching, just in the room. I looked at him, tired eyes, rumpled shirt, the man who had once been my safest place, and after a long moment, nodded. Floor's fine. Bring the spare blanket. He spread it out on his side of the bed, close enough to hear each other breathe, but far enough that the space felt respected. And when the lights went out, the darkness wasn't as complete. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling fan's slow spin, listening to his steady breathing. And for the first time since the discovery, a sliver of calm settled in. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the tentative knowledge that we were both still here, trying separate things that might one day meet in the middle. My phone buzzed once on the nightstand, a work reminder for tomorrow. But I ignored it, turning instead toward the faint outline of him on the floor, and whispered into the quiet, "Good night." He answered softly, "Good night, Claire." And though the word love stayed unspoken, the simple exchange felt like the smallest vulnerability we'd risked together since everything broke. Sleep came slowly, fractured by old hurts surfacing in half dreams, but when I woke in the night to the sound of rain starting again, soft against the roof, I didn't feel quite so alone in it. Down the hall, Emily's white noise machine hummed steadily, a reminder of what we were circling back toward, and on the floor, Alex shifted once, sighing in his sleep, the sound familiar and strangely comforting. I closed my eyes again, letting the rhythm of the house, the rain, the fan, his breathing, lull me towards something that wasn't quite hope yet, but close enough to keep breathing through the night. The first joint session arrived on a Wednesday afternoon, 2 weeks after my individual start, the sky outside Dr. Ramirez's office heavy with the threat of early snow flurries that would dust the parking lot cars in white by evening. I'd driven us there together because separate cars felt too much like escape routes, the silence in the SUV thick, but not entirely hostile. Alex had turned the radio to the oldies station we used to sing along to on long drives to his parents' lake house, keeping the volume low so neither of us had to commit to conversation, and when Landslide came on, he glanced at me once, a quick flicker of recognition before looking back at the road, the lyrics hanging between us like an unspoken question about whether we could still climb mountains after the ground had shifted. We sat in the waiting area on opposite ends of the small couch, knees angled away, scrolling our phones without really seeing the screens. Me checking Emily's school app for the day's behavior report. All green stars, thank God. Him tapping through work emails he'd already answered. Until the door opened and Dr. Door opened. Ramirez welcomed us in with the same calm warmth she'd offered me alone, gesturing to two chairs placed at a slight angle to each other, rather than directly facing. A subtle arrangement that said we were here as partners in this room, not adversaries across a table. She started gently, asking each of us to name one thing we hoped to get from these joint conversations. And I went first because the words had been building pressure behind my ribs for days. I want to understand why it happened without it feeling like I'm being asked to excuse it. And I want to know if there's still a version of us that can exist after this, without me always wondering when the next secret might drop. My voice stayed steady but thin, the way it does when you're holding back sobs by sheer willpower. And Alex listened with his hands clasped between his knees, head bowed slightly, nodding once when I finished like he was taking the weight of every syllable. When it was his turn, he exhaled long and slow before speaking. I want to own what I did without hiding behind excuses about stress or feeling unseen, and I want Claire to feel safe enough to tell me the worst things she's thinking, so I can sit with them instead of running. And I want us to find a way to rebuild something real, not just patched up. The room held the words for a moment, heavy and necessary. Then Dr. Ramirez asked us to name the deepest hurt each of us carried right now. No sugarcoating. I said, the lies layered over ordinary moments, the goodnight kisses after he'd been with her, the I love you text while he was in her apartment, the way he came home smelling like her perfume, and blamed it on the office air freshener. That's what keeps replaying. How easily he wore two lives at once. Tears came then, hot and fast, and I didn't wipe them away. Let them fall onto my jeans like evidence. Alex waited until I was done, then spoke quietly, voice rough. My deepest hurt is knowing I broke the one person who trusted me most, and that I might have lost the right to be the man she thought I was. Every time I see Claire flinch when I reach for something simple, like passing the salt, I feel it all over again, that I turned her safety into doubt. Hearing him name it without deflection cracked something open in me. Not forgiveness exactly, but a recognition that the pain wasn't one-sided in its sharpness. His guilt had teeth, too. From there, the session moved into mapping the deeper issues beneath the affair, how the pressure to provide had become a quiet identity crisis for him after his company restructured and he took on more responsibility without more pay. How he'd started numbing the anxiety with after-work drinks that turned into dinners that turned into something else, because talking to me about feeling like a failure felt riskier than risking our marriage. I listened, really listened, and when Dr. Ramirez asked if I recognized any of my own contributions to the drift, I admitted, haltingly, that I'd leaned so hard into being the competent one that I'd stopped asking how he was beyond surface check ins, that I'd assumed his silences were just tiredness instead of signals, that I'd let routine become a shield against vulnerability. Because after the miscarriage, and my dad's death, it felt safer to manage than to feel. Naming it didn't erase the betrayal, but it widened the frame so the story wasn't only his failure, it was ours, tangled in ways that made blame feel less clean, and healing feel less impossible. Toward the end, she invited us to try one small act of reconnection right there. To face each other, hold hands if it felt bearable, and each say one thing we still appreciated about the other despite everything. My palms were damp, hard hammering, but I extended my hand first, his closed around it carefully, thumb brushing once over my knuckles, like he was asking permission to stay. I went first again. I still appreciate how you show up for Emily, how you never miss a game or a concert, how you make her feel like she's the center of your world even when you're falling apart inside. He swallowed, eyes glistening. I still appreciate how you hold everything together without asking for credit, how you make our house feel like home, even on the days you want to leave it. And I appreciate that you're here, trying, when you have every reason not to. The words landed soft but solid, and for a long minute we just sat like that, hands linked, breathing in sync while Dr. Ramirez watched without speaking, letting the moment stretch. When the session ended, we didn't rush out. We lingered in the parking lot beside the car, snow starting to fall in lazy flakes that caught in his hair and melted on my coat sleeve. Neither of us suggested stopping for coffee or dinner. Too soon for that kind of normalcy. But he opened the passenger door for me, the way he always had, and when I slid in, I didn't pull away when his fingers brushed mine on the gear shift. The drive home was quiet again, but different quiet. Less like a void and more like space we were both choosing to share. Emily was at Riley's for an after-school project, so the house greeted us empty. Lights off except the foyer lamp we always left on. Alex flicked on the kitchen overhead, started the kettle without asking because he knew chamomile was my evening ritual now. And I stood at the island watching him move through the familiar steps. 2 mugs, honey for mine, nothing for his. And when he set the tea in front of me, our fingers touched again, deliberate this time. Thank you for today, I said, voice low, for saying it all out loud. He looked at me, really looked, eyes tired but clear. Thank you for listening. For not walking out when I admitted, I felt invisible. We didn't hug, didn't kiss, didn't pretend the chasm was gone. But we stayed in the same room longer than we had in weeks, sipping tea while the snow thickened outside, talking in fragments about nothing important. Emily's upcoming band concert, whether we should finally replace the leaky faucet in the guest bath. Ordinary words that felt like tiny bridges. Later, when Emily came home flushed from the cold and full of stories about glitter explosions during their volcano model, we ate leftover stir-fry at the table together, the 3 of us, and when she asked why we were both smiling a little more tonight, I said, we had a good talk today, sweetie. And Alex added, yeah, we're working on being better at talking, and she grinned, like that was the most normal answer in the world. Bedtime came, teeth brushed, stories read. Alex took the outer voice duty tonight, making her giggle until her eyelids drooped, and when we closed her door, the hallway felt warmer, less like a corridor between separate lives. In our room, I changed into pajamas while he brushed his teeth. Then I climbed under the covers on my side. He hesitated at the foot of the bed, pillow in hand, like he was still asking permission for the floor. But I patted the mattress beside me, small, tentative, and said, dear so, tentative, and said, you can sleep here tonight. Just sleep. He exhaled something that sounded like relief, slid in carefully, keeping to his edge, and when he turned off the lamp, the darkness wrapped around us, softer than it had in weeks. I felt the mattress dip. With his weight, hurt his breathing even out slowly. And after a long while, I reached across the divide, not to hold his hand, but to rest my fingers lightly on the back of his skin-warm, pulse steady, and he didn't pull away, just turned his palm up so our hands rested together in the middle of the bed, like a quiet promise to keep trying. No fireworks, no rush of passion, just the simple fact of same room breathing, same bed warmth, the first night in what felt like forever, that the space between us held possibility instead of only pain. Outside, the snow kept falling, blanketing the street, in hush, and inside our house, the furnace clicked on, the fan spun lazily overhead, Emily's white noise hummed down the hall, and for the first time since that rainy Thursday, I let myself believe that small steps, hand-holding in therapy, shared tea in the kitchen, sleeping side by side without touching, might be enough to start closing the distance we both helped create. Sleep came gradual, layered with the awareness of his presence inches away, not threatening but anchoring. And when I woke once in the night to the sound of wind rattling the windows, I didn't feel the urge to turn away. I just lay there listening to him breathe. Feeling the faint rise and fall of the mattress, and let the quiet hope settle deeper, scarred but persistent, whispering that maybe, just maybe, we were beginning to find our way back to each other, one careful, honest moment at a time. The idea for the family weekend came up almost casually during the 3rd joint session the following week, when Dr. Ramirez asked what small, contained experience might test the fragile new patterns we were trying to build without the safety net of daily routines. Alex suggested the cabin first, his parents' old place upstate on Lake Willow, 2 hours north, the one we hadn't visited since Emily was 8, because life got busy and the drive felt too long for a single night. But the mention of it lit something tentative in both of us. A memory of simpler times when the biggest worry was whether the dock spiders would scare her off the swimming ladder. I surprised myself by agreeing almost immediately. 3 days, just us, no work laptops, no phones on the table during meals, the kind of deliberate unplugging that felt both terrifying and necessary after weeks of careful, measured interactions in the safety of our suburban house. Emily's face, when we told her, lit up like Christmas morning. She'd been asking about the cabin for months, remembering the fireflies and the sea mirrors and the way the water looked black at night under the dock lights, so we booked the long weekend around her fall break. Packed the car Thursday night with sleeping bags, board games, groceries for chili and pancakes, and the ancient fishing rods Alex swore still worked, even though the last time we used them, Emily caught a boot instead of a base. We left early Friday morning, before the traffic thickened, Emily in the backseat with her headphones on, watching a movie on the tablet, Alex driving with one hand on the wheel and the other resting near the gear shift. Close enough that our pinkies brushed once when he downshifted for a curve. A small contact that sent a quiet current through me. Not passion exactly, but proof that touch could still feel safe instead of suspect. The first hour passed in companionable quiet, broken only by Emily's occasional commentary. Dad, remember when you tried to teach me to whistle and I sprayed you with spit? And his laughing reply, yeah, and you still owe me a new shirt. The easy banter a balm after so many careful conversations. By the time we turned onto the gravel road that wound through pines to the cabin, the air smelled of damp earth and wood smoke from someone's chimney farther up the lake. And when we pulled up to the weathered gray, clapboard house with its sagging porch and the red Adirondack chairs still stacked against the railing, Emily bolted out before the engine fully stopped, racing to the dock to check if the water was as cold as she remembered. Alex and I unloaded slowly, carrying coolers and duffels inside where the familiar musty scent of lake house hit me. Pine cleaner, old books, the faint tang of mildew we could never quite banish, and for a moment standing in the living room with its naughty pine walls and the stone fireplace we'd promised to use more often. I felt the weight of everything we'd carried here, the betrayal still present, like a bruise that ached when pressed, but also the slow rebuilding that had brought us to this isolated place to see if it could hold. We spent the afternoon settling in, Emily and Alex building a fire, while I chopped vegetables for chili, the three of us moving around each other with a rhythm that felt remembered, rather than forced. When the sun dropped low enough to turn the lake gold, we walked the short trail to the rocky point where we used to skip stones, Emily hurling hers with fierce concentration until she got 3 bounces and whooped like she'd won an Olympic medal. Alex tried to show her, the wrist flick he'd perfected as a kid, standing behind her to guide her arm. And when their laughter carried back to me on the breeze, I stood a little apart watching them, the sight twisting something bittersweet in my chest. Grief for the innocence we'd almost lost, gratitude that it wasn't gone entirely. Dinner was around the fire pit on the lawn, because the evening stayed mild enough, chili steaming in bowls, cornbread crumbling into it. Emily telling ghost stories she'd learned from Riley that were more silly than scary, until she got to one, about a lady in white, walking the lake at midnight, and suddenly, huddled closer to me on the bench. Alex added logs to keep the flames high, sparks drifting up into the darkening sky, and when Emily finally yawned herself into near sleep, we carried her inside, tucked her into the bunk bed in the loft with extra blankets against the chill that always crept in off the water after dark. Downstairs we cleaned up quietly, the clink of dishes and running water, the only sounds until Alex said, "Lo, want to sit outside a bit? Stars are out?" I nodded, grabbed the wool throw from the couch, and we settled on the porch steps, shoulders almost touching, the night air sharp with pine and distant wood smoke. For a long while neither of us spoke. The lake lapped softly at the dock pilings. An owl called somewhere in the trees, and the quiet felt full instead of empty. Then Alex said, "I keep thinking about the night I told you, how I sat there waiting for you to scream or throw something, and you just asked questions like you were trying to understand a puzzle, even while it was breaking you." I pulled the blanket tighter around my knees. I wanted to scream. I wanted to disappear. But Emily was upstairs, and I couldn't let the house fall apart in one night. He turned slightly toward me. "I'm still amazed you didn't walk out. Most people would have. I thought about it," I admitted. Every day for the first week. But every time I pictured leaving, I pictured her face when she realized both of us weren't coming home the same way and I couldn't do it. Not yet. He nodded slowly. "I don't deserve that grace." "No," I said, honest, "you don't. But I'm not giving it because you deserve it. I'm giving it because I'm choosing what kind of story I want for us, for her. And staying, trying, feels like the harder, truer thing right now." Silence again, longer this time. Then he reached over and covered my hand with his, where it rested on the step between us. I didn't pull away, just let the warmth seep in his calluses from weekend projects familiar against my skin. "I love you, Claire," he said quietly. The words simple, stripped of any plea. I know I broke the right to say it easily, but I need you to hear it anyway. I turned my hand palm up, lacing our fingers loosely. "I still love you too. It's messy and angry and hurts every day, but it's still there. That's why we're here." We sat like that until the fire died to embers, then went inside, where the cabin felt smaller, cozier. Upstairs, Emily was snoring softly in the loft, one arm dangling over the bunk rail, clutching the otter. In the narrow bedroom we'd always shared, double bed with the quilt his mom made, we changed in the dark, the routine intimate, without demand, and when we slid under the covers, he stayed on his side, I on mine. But after a minute, I shifted closer, not touching, but near enough to feel his body heat. "Can I hold you?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated, the old reflex of self-protection flaring, then nodded against the pillow. He moved slowly, arms sliding around my waist from behind, chin tucking against my shoulder, and I let myself relax into the curve of him, the steady rise of his chest against my back. A rhythm I'd known for half my life. No more than that, no kisses, no urgency. Just the simple act of bodies remembering each other in the quiet dark, the lake whispering outside, the cabin creaking as it settled. I felt tears slip silently down my temples into my hair. Not grief exactly, but something closer to release. To the acknowledgement that forgiveness wasn't a single moment, but layers of small surrenders like this one. He pressed a soft kiss to the back of my neck, not possessive, just tender, and murmured, "Thank you for letting me near you again." I reached back, found his hand where it rested on my stomach, squeezed once. "Thank you for staying worth it." Sleep came easier than it had in months, wrapped in his arms, the night folding around us like a promise we were still learning to keep. In the morning, Emily's footsteps thundered down the loft stairs calling for pancakes, and we woke tangled together, blinking at the light slanting through the pine branches, sharing a small, sleepy smile before disentangling to meet the day. The rest of the weekend passed in ordinary magic, kayaking on the glassy lake, with Emily in the middle, giggling every time we rocked the boat, hikes along trails carpeted in fallen leaves where she collected acorns for a nature collage, evenings by the fire playing cards and telling stories until yawns overtook us. Each day, the physical closeness grew a fraction, his hand on the small of my back guiding me over roots, my head on his shoulder during a sunset walk, a quick hug in the kitchen when Emily wasn't looking. And with it, the emotional thaw deepened, not erasing the scars, but softening the edges so they didn't cut quite as deep. On the last night, after Emily was asleep, we sat on the dock wrapped in the same blanket, feet dangling over the water, stars sharp overhead. I leaned into him fully, let him pull me close, and when he kissed me, slow, careful, asking, rather than taking, I kissed back, tasting salt and relief, and the faint promise of more healing to come. We didn't make love that night. It felt too soon, too loaded, but the kiss lingered, a reconnection that carried us through the drive home Sunday evening with Emily singing in the back seat. The car filled with the scent of wood smoke in our clothes, and something warmer between us that hadn't been there when we left. As the city lights appeared on the horizon, and our house waited at the end of Maple Drive, I reached over and rested my hand on his thigh, not possessively, just present, and he covered it with his own, squeezing once. The weekend hadn't fixed everything. The trust was still tender, the hurt still echoed in quiet moments, but it had shown us that closeness was possible again. Not the same as before, but deeper in places because we'd chosen it through pain instead of coasting into it. Driving up the driveway with Emily, already planning the next trip, I felt the quiet certainty settle. We were healing, not perfectly, not quickly, but together, and that hard-earned closeness was worth every careful step it had taken to reach this scarred but stronger place. 1 year to the day since that rainy Thursday, when the blue dot on my phone's screen first cracked open, the life I thought we had. The house on Maple Drive looked almost exactly the same from the outside, same faded navy shutters. Same crooked mailbox Emily had painted with daisies in 5th grade, same basketball hoops still slightly bent from Alex's enthusiastic layups with the neighborhood kids, but inside the changes were quieter, deeper, etched into the small daily rhythms that had rebuilt themselves around the scar tissue we both carried. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon from the apple crisp cooling on the counter. A recipe I'd pulled from an old family cookbook last fall during one of those tentative weekends when we were still learning how to be in the same room without every silence feeling loaded. Emily was 13 now, taller than me when she stood on tiptoe, her hair longer and streaked with the purple she'd begged for over spring break, currently upstairs, blasting music through her headphones while she finished a history project on the women's suffrage movement. Her laughter occasionally drifting down when she FaceTimed Riley to complain about citation formats. Alex came through the back door, just after 6, coat dusted with the first real snow of the season, carrying 2 paper bags from the Thai place we'd started ordering from again because Pad C, ew, had become our low-effort Friday comfort food. He set them on the island, shook flakes from his hair like a dog coming in from the rain, and caught my eye with a small, private smile that had returned over months of therapy, small acts and nights when we actually slept facing each other instead of back to back. Traffic was brutal, he said, voice low enough not to carry upstairs, but I got extra spring rolls because Emily texted me she was starving to death at 3. I laughed softly. The sound still surprised me sometimes. And then, how easily it came now, and handed him plates from the cabinet we'd reorganized last summer during one of those cleaning purges that felt more like clearing emotional clutter than dusting shelves. We moved around each other with the ease of long habit, but now it carried intention. His hand brushing my waist when he reached past me for napkins, my shoulder leaning into his for a second when I set out the silverware, touches that no longer felt tentative but earned, tested through arguments where we actually stayed in the room until the hurt was named instead of buried. Dinner unfolded the way it had most Friday nights this past year. Emily thundering down the stairs mid-story about how her history teacher said her essay outline was ambitious, Alex teasing her about using words bigger than her head. Me watching them both with a quiet fullness that still caught me off guard. We ate at the table instead of in front of the television, because we'd made that a rule after the cabin weekend. No screens during meals, just us, even if the conversation sometimes stumbled over old habits or new awkwardness. Tonight Emily dominated, recounting every detail of the school talent show rehearsal, where Riley almost dropped her baton during a routine they'd choreographed to a song I pretended not to recognize from my own teenage years, and when she finally paused to breathe, Alex asked, gentle, "You nervous about performing in front of everyone?" She shrugged, twisting low man around her fork. "A little, but Mom said, it's okay to be nervous, as long as I don't let it stop me." She glanced at me, eyes bright, then at him, and Dad said he'd be in the front row embarrassing me with his cheering. He grinned, unrepentant. "Damn right I will." After she cleared her plate and disappeared upstairs again, homework, shower, the usual Friday wind down, Alex and I lingered at the table, the snow tapping softly against the windows, the string lights we'd hung early for the holidays casting a warm glow over the holidays, casting a warm glow over the empty chairs. He reached across and took my hand thumb, tracing slow circles over my knuckles, the way he used to before everything fractured. I didn't pull away, just let the contact settle, familiar and new at once. 1 year, he said quietly, like he had been counting the days too. Feels longer and shorter, doesn't it? I nodded. Longer because every day we chose to stay felt like climbing a hill. Shorter because I can't imagine the version of us that didn't make it through. We sat with that for a minute, the house breathing around us. Fernie's humming. Emily's music a muffled bass line overhead. The fridge giving its occasional soft click. Then he said, I still go to therapy every other week. Not because I think I'm going to slip again, but because I never want to be the man who stops checking himself. I squeezed his hand. I'm down to once a month now, but I keep the journal going. Some days I write about how angry I still get when I remember certain things. Other days I write about how grateful I am. We didn't give up. He looked at me, eyes steady. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd left that night? All the time, I admitted. I picture the apartment I'd have found, the custody schedule, Emily splitting holidays. It makes me sick, not because I regret considering it. I needed to know I had that choice, but because I'm glad we found another path. He exhaled, long and slow. I'm glad too, and I'm sorry still. Every day. I know, I said, and I forgive you. Not because it's erased, but because holding on to the anger would cost more than letting it soften. We're different now. Stronger in the broken places, like that Japanese pottery thing with the gold seams. He smiled faintly. Kintsugi, yeah. That. We cleared the table together, loaded the dishwasher side by side, the small domestic choreography feeling like its own kind of intimacy. When the kitchen was tidy, we moved to the living room. Lights low, the snow outside thickening into a proper blanket over the lawn. I curled into the corner of the couch with my chamomile. He sat close enough that our thighs touched, and after a while I rested my head on his shoulder, letting the weight of the day and the year settle there. His arm came around me naturally, hand resting warm on my upper arm, and we stayed like that, watching the flakes drift past the window. No need to fill the quiet with words. Upstairs, Emily's music cut off, footsteps padded to the bathroom, then her door clicked shut. Soon the house would fall into its nighttime hush. Alex pressed a kiss to my temple, soft, lingering. I love you, Claire. Not the easy way, the real way, the one that knows what it almost lost. I turned my face into his neck, breathed him in, faint trace of his cologne mixed with snow and Thai spices, and whispered back, I love you too, the scarred version, the one who came back every day and chose us again. We didn't say more. We didn't need to. Later we climbed the stairs together, checked on Emily. She was asleep with her otter tucked under her chin, phone charging on the nightstand, and then slipped into our room, the bed no longer divided by invisible lines. We undressed in the dark, slid under the covers, and this time when he pulled me close, I went willingly, body fitting against his like it remembered, every curve and hollow. His hand found mine under the quilt, fingers lacing tight, and I felt the steady beat of his heart against my back, mine answering in kind. No rush, no urgency, just the quiet certainty that we had survived the worst, and chosen each day since to build something stronger from the pieces. Sleep came, gentle, layered with the awareness of his breathing, the snow muffling the world outside, Emily safe down the hall, our life, not perfect, still carrying faint echoes of pain, nevertheless, whole in a way it hadn't been before the fracture. In the morning, we would wake to her, bounding in with demands for hot chocolate and snowman building, to coffee brewing and laughter over burnt toast, to another ordinary Saturday that felt extraordinary because we'd fought for it. But tonight, in the dark with his arms around me and the year's hard-won peace, settling over us like fresh snow, I let myself rest fully in the knowledge that we were here. Not back to who we were, but forward to who we had become together. Scarred, yes, but stronger. More honest. House, but stronger. More honest. More tender in the places that once bled. The bond wasn't unbreakable anymore, we knew that now. But it was repairable, renewable, worth every tear and every choice to stay. And as the house sighed into silence around us, I closed my eyes and thought, for the first time without qualification, we made it. Not to perfection, but to this. Quiet, realistic hope made real in the steady warmth of the van beside me, the child sleeping peacefully upstairs, and the life we were still, every day, choosing to keep.